Welcome to your Highness podcast. I'm your host, Diana.
And I'm your co-host, JR.
This is our first episode in a studio.
Look
everybody.
at it. It's
so
amazing.
It's if I'm acting a little awkward, it's because I'm trying to get used to this. And
yeah, we're not so used to this. Normally, I'm wearing pajama pants even while we're recording.
Yeah,
So
and
getting fully dressed and actually being on camera is a little bizarre.
I was going to say I'm not always wearing pants because I usually wear dress, but I don't know
Yeah.
if to fill it in with that part, and people just think I'm not wearing pants.
Yeah, I think you're just walking around bottomless.
Sometimes, no, I'm kidding. Maybe in the earlier days,
Yeah.
Anyway, so again, welcome to your Highness podcast. So if this is the first time you've ever listened to the episode, we begin every episode with an icebreaker called Fave Pot, Fave Not Pot, where each one of us talk about our favorite cannabis-related thing and our favorite non-cannabis-related thing. And we don't really have visuals today. I have one visual, but next time, now that we're getting used to the video thing, we'll get there.
We'll have some visuals.
Right. So I'm going to start as I always do. My fave pot right now is a strain called Purple Punch, and JR is really good at talking about why I like the strain.
Well, no, it's just it's a nice strain. I mean, it's an indica. It gives a very nice body feel, and
but I feel like I can do it during the day, not to cut you off.
Well, because it's also a mood uplifter.
Yeah.
So, if you're in a bad mood, it's actually a go-to strain. If you're having a bad day, if you just got in an argument with somebody, if you feel like you're in a place where if you were to start talking to somebody, it could escalate into an argument. Purple Punch really does kind of help stabilize that mood.
If you're about to go to the pool
it.
with a bunch of screaming kids around you. Okay.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a very nice strain. Some people actually use it to help them go to sleep, but I've actually found it's more appropriate as a mood uplifter, in my personal opinion.
Is that what you feel?
That's just how I feel.
Oh, okay. Yeah. What's your fave pot right now?
Mine is actually it's not as exciting. It's a Dr. Solomon's Balm. And it was going to be something different up until I woke up this morning. We started playing tennis again. And granted, not like we are pro tennis players, nor have we ever been, nor am I very in shape at all. So after running back and forth in a very incoordinated way on the tennis courts, wearing shoes that I wasn't supposed to be wearing, I woke up and was like, apparently a group of clowns broke into my bedroom last night and started beating me with baseball bats. I was like that sore. So, times like this.
It's a weird place to go with it.
It's where it went. That was my thought when I woke up in the morning. Yes. So days like this, Dr. Solomon's Balm. It's a topical. It's not exciting. It's kind of, it's a topical. Yeah, no one gets excited about topicals.
I love Dr. Solomon's. By the way, BTW.
Yeah, but you're not going to go to a party and be like, "Oh, look what I brought," and pull out a jar of Dr. Solomon's.
I mean, I wouldn't bring anything like that anyway. People think I bring things like that, but I don't.
Yeah, but we have to think of younger people. Not everyone's old and boring like us. Like some people like to bring things to parties.
Okay.
Some people like to go to parties.
I think that's a nice party gift. I would be happy if somebody brought me some.
Yeah, but we are old. Like if you go, 20-year-olds aren't going to a party being like Dr. Solomon's. It's.
All right. Well.
Anyway,
this is not
my fave pot
party.
Is Dr. Solomon's.
This isn't fave party.
I didn't say it was. I said it wasn't exciting.
All right. Well, my fave not pot isn't that exciting. It's exciting for me.
Okay.
I mean, it might be exciting for a lot of people. This is where we have a visual.
Oh.
So I was sent a whole set of hair products to try, which that's like really my jam.
That's a jam of yours, yes.
For those who don't know, I used to be a hairstylist, and one thing I can say is that it is really hard to find a dry shampoo that is not going to make your hair have like a coat of white on it if you have dark hair, or dry your hair out, or have like a chemical kind of smell to it. So anyway, I was sent these products by Vegemore, and I hope I'm pronouncing it right. I might not be. Vegamore. I should have looked into that before we began. But anyway, they are a vegan. It's a vegan company, and they have a bunch of plant-based hair products and this dry shampoo. I mean, you'll be hearing about more, trust, because I really love this line. But it's their Grow Dry Shampoo, and it just absorbs so quickly. I don't get that really weird film, and it smells so nice. And it's made with mineral oils. No, it's not made with mineral oils. It's free of mineral oils. Scratch that. That's what I meant to say. Anyway, and it gives you nice little volume without giving you like a halo of frizz, which always happens when I use dry shampoo. So I'm a fan.
Very nice.
What's your fave not pot right now?
Mine it's a television program, and it is called Channel Zero. Now, we are now after the 4th of July, which officially marks the start of spooky season. Because most people view spooky season starting after 4th of July because the next major holiday coming up is Halloween, outside of socialists who still celebrate Labor Day, or very rich people who don't understand the concept of Labor Day and get off while actual workers still work. But I digress. So
You
spooky,
never.
so spooky season started up. So I'm watching Channel Zero. It is an anthology show where every season is based off of a different creepypasta. Creepypastas, if you don't know, are essentially like short flash fictions on the internet. You know, they're not going through editors and publishing houses and stuff like that. They're just posted up in these creepypastas. A lot of them, are, fake rituals and stuff like that. This where Slender Man actually came from was creepypastas. And I'm on the first season, which is based off the creepypasta Candle Cove, about a program that the author remembers watching as a child with these marionette puppets, and it just devolves into madness. The longer the show goes on, and then reflecting back and talking to his mom about it at the end, you find out that she would just go into the room and he actually wasn't watching a program. He'd just be watching static on TV. So this first season is based off of that. It has fake Dane Cook in it. I don't
People
know
don't
his
know what you're
name.
talking
I
about.
can't think of his name
We
off.
call him Fake Dane Cook, and that is not fair. People don't know that inside joke. So anyway, we should have looked him up on. Why don't we look him up on IMDb right now? Because I feel like that's.
He's been in other things. He's I'm sure, very stand up.
He was in Parks and Rec for anyone who watched that show in the first season.
He was in Parks and Rec for the first season. And then he was in some other things. And granted, he doesn't necessarily act or look or anything like that like Dane Cook, but we just know him
In
as
the earlier days.
Paul Schneider.
Okay.
So if you're watching or listening to this, Paul Schneider,
We
I
are
do
sorry.
deeply
We are sorry.
apologize for not knowing your name off the top
We're
of my head
fans.
and calling you fake Dane Cook. We actually prefer you over Dane Cook,
Well, much, much, much more so.
especially now.
Yeah, this is back when we didn't know as much as we do now, and
Yeah.
your hair kind of looked the same. Anyway,
Yeah.
we don't need to
Same
overexplain
color
it.
hair, and that's all we needed to run
Right.
with it.
So if you can't tell by this conversation, we're neurodivergent. And which is why we talk about it a lot on this podcast, and we talk about being accessible. And we haven't gotten really granular with the being accessible for neurodivergent people yet.
No, we haven't.
Which is an oversight because unfortunately neurodivergence is often overlooked, and I think we all just get kind of used to saying, well, I have this, I have ADHD, some people even say it as a joke, but the reality is it's very common. And I wouldn't say it's very common nowadays because that's not the proper wording. It is people are becoming more aware of how to diagnose properly. And with that, we're starting to see some workplaces become more accessible. And now cannabis is a new industry, so some people say, well, it's still new, but there are so many things that you can do that are free or next to free, very easy, that to accommodate, like,
Yeah, no one's asking you to rewrite your operations or anything
right.
like that, but there are some small things that you can do that will help. I mean, it's not going to solve everything. With cannabis being a very new industry, things are constantly changing, which in and of itself can be difficult for neurodivergent people. But there are certain things that you can kind of set into place that will kind of help ease the situation. I know one of the biggest ones you wanted to bring up was interviews.
Right. I mean, just to begin with, the interview process. First of all, going remote, which I know we'll touch on, but like even from the start, having the ability to do interviews remotely is a big deal.
That's a big deal. And even though this isn't just strictly a cannabis thing, some of the things that do pop up are the excessive amount of interviews. These interview chains that you can be interviewing with 5 to 6 people, each interview lasting up to a half an hour to 45 minutes, if not scheduled out properly, can be very difficult for someone that is neurodivergent. If you're having a block of interviews back to back to back to back, which I've gone through myself, it can get very, very taxing and very difficult for you to carry on.
Right.
Much like, once originally bringing someone on and onboarding them, the way the training is held, making sure that someone isn't just sitting in a room for 2 days for their entire shift just doing online modules for trainings and watching videos. A lot of the times, not just the fact that everyone learns completely different, but everyone needs to be able to take that break.
And it's a good time to ask somebody, what do you need?
Exactly.
Let's normalize that part of it. The employer asking the potential employee, how can I make this interview process easier for you?
Exactly. And a lot of that comes down to just open communication, having that open communication from employer to employee, employee to employer of how someone can best thrive in the atmosphere. Like I said, cannabis is new and constantly changing. With that, it can be very difficult for someone that's neurodivergent, someone that kind of needs to have their life scheduled out in a very specific way. That's kind of how I am. Even though a lot of people view me as like this very carefree kind of energy, a lot of my life is actually very scheduled
It's
out.
called masking. We're both very good
Yeah,
at
we're both.
it.
Yeah, well,
Well, you're
well,
better at it than I
we were
am.
children of the '80s, so we had the. But no, like my life needs to be very scheduled out. But with cannabis, with everything constantly changing, the rules and regulations can change week to week, and with that, hours of operations can change, and we're constantly having new holidays, new busy days that we need to schedule up for. So with that, you see a lot of change in people's schedules, which could affect their sleep schedule and just their daily life schedule. So really making sure that those communications are had well in advance. If there's going to be an hour change, letting people know the moment that it's discovered, giving them at least a few weeks to be able to adjust to it, to be able to kind of preemptively start changing their sleep schedule, making sure that schedules, because in cannabis, if you're in the retail end of it, especially if you're in adult use market, it's just retail. You're essentially living under the parameters of retail. So with that, schedules are constantly needing to change depending on if someone is taking PTO or needing off, if there's a holiday coming up, if there's end of month inventory coming up. So making sure that those schedules are done well in advance, giving them at least 2 to 3 weeks beforehand to know what their schedule is so that they can prepare for it so they're not blindsided with it that week. Thankfully the company I work with, they standardize having early schedules, but I've heard from other people that the companies they work for, they'll get their schedule on a Sunday that is reflective of that next Monday forward. And you can't do that to people. You can't do that to people that are neurotypical. You need to make sure that people have advanced knowledge of when they're working so that they can make those adjustments, and making sure that you have that in place for people that are neurodivergent and rely on a steadier schedule is key to be able to allow them to thrive in an atmosphere.
And one thing I would add to that because, as I mentioned, I was a stylist, but a big part of that was being a salesperson and trying to sell retail. And the way my brain works, I tell the truth. And when
Yeah.
people ask me, which one do you like? Which one would you actually recommend? And that often got me in trouble.
Yeah.
So I would say something like prioritize training around products, around that mentality, instead of, trying to put the customer in a place where they're necessarily comfortable. I mean, I know we're supposed to say the customer is always right, but a lot
Yeah.
of the complaints I hear about bud tenders are that they're not, being personable enough, or they're not telling, they're not saying like what they prefer, but they're probably afraid to do that, and they don't really know how, because they're being trained to, recommend one product over another instead of saying like, maybe I don't really like that one. This is what I would use.
Absolutely. And then if you're starting to view going into the cannabis industry and you're thinking, well, that sounds like me. I don't necessarily want to be a face selling anything. And you might be thinking that you want to go into a grow or a processor. That brings its own areas of difficulties for neurodivergence, primarily with stimulation, especially when it comes to lights and odors, smells,
Yep.
especially in the processing department. You know, those oils and those cartridges, they're not just extracted without anything that is odoriferous. So you really have to make sure that the place that you're looking at working has a area that is calming, lower, dim lights, without a lot of those heavy smells for if you do get overstimulated.
Or rather, the grow, the
Yeah.
company running the grow should provide some
Yeah.
type of,
Well, that's what I meant. Not that
yeah.
you do the work yourself,
Right.
but it should be offered to you, and you should be allowed to enter that space and take those breaks without reprimand. Having time where you can go and take those 10-minute breaks without worrying about getting written up or yelled at. That's key.
Yeah,
That's very key.
it is very
Yeah.
key. So, I mean, those are just a few things that people can do.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of some others, but I feel like there are a lot.
There's a
are
lot.
so many.
It's
But
it's
just
hard.
beginning with asking the people that work for you, where can we start? I mean, that's a huge step in itself,
Yeah,
I feel.
absolutely.
Getting a survey out there, asking people, how can we make you feel more comfortable? Because when you do that, it makes people loyal to your company. So anyway, do you want to add anything to that?
No, like you said, it's hard to kind of space this down into just one singular episode because
Right. There's a lot.
neurodivergence is very broad, and the cannabis industry itself is very broad and very changing. So this is something that could be a full series that takes weeks on end. So to try to act like we're doing all that we can in this one episode, that's impossible.
Right, because we still have a lot more to go. We're going to
Yeah.
have our local segment following this, um, with a local look at New York,
Ooh.
at New York City, more specifically.
New York.
No.
I'm breaking out. This is where I'm gonna break out to be a singer. Just you wait.
But yeah, so before we get into that segment, though, I just want to make a quick note about a podcast that I think you all should be listening to, and it's called How to Do the Pods. Now, we don't really get into the science of the cannabis plant on this show, really at all.
No, we're more industry based.
Yeah, we examine the industry, and obviously we just talked about accessibility.
Plants is our other podcast. But
Yes,
that's
Getting
an
Personal with
overarching-
Plant Medicine is our other podcast where we do get a little bit more scientific about
Yeah.
all different types. And on that note, really quickly, be sure to check out our Substack, because our Your Highness Media Substack, we've been doing a lot with it. I mean,
There's a whole chronicle of my plants.
yes, we are.
And you want to read that.
Right.
It's fun.
It is. And we're chronicling, kombucha fails. And I mean, it's all related to plants, but it's going to be a good summer of content. And
Yes.
so definitely subscribe to Your Highness Media on Substack if you haven't yet. Okay, so now back to my recommendation, which is a podcast that is really it's such a wealth of knowledge, honestly. 3 out of 4 women in the US have access to legal cannabis, and most of them have a lot of questions. How to Do the Pot is an award-winning cannabis podcast sharing joyful stories and useful advice about cannabis for health, well-being, and fun, especially for needs specific to women. The show covers everything from the best weed for sex to how weed is helping women with cramps and with menopause. How to Do the Pot's Essential Strains series will help you find your favorites, including why women love strains like Harlequin or Gelato. I like Gelato.
Yeah. I like Harlequin.
Yeah, you'll hear women across the country share stories about their first time buying legal weed and learn how they talk about cannabis with their families. How to Do the Pot is hosted by Ellen Scanlon, whose mission is to inspire women to make more informed choices about their health and well-being. Join Ellen as she talks to medical professionals for practical tips, experts for cannabis recommendations, and listeners for funny and intimate stories. And before we end this, we really would like to hear from you because we want to hear about how your company that you're working for is being more accessible to your neurodivergence. So please email us at yourhighnesspodcast@gmail.com. Send us stories of, if you're seeing that it's not doing that where you work, tell us about that too, because we're really interested to see how companies and brands and things like that are being more accessible and flexible, because we want to support those people. So reach out to us.
Absolutely.
All right. So stay tuned for our local look segment.
Bye.
This podcast has been a product of Your Highness Media. Each episode is written, produced, and edited by Your Highness Media. Thank you for listening.